Will Lucas here, another Black Tech Green Money. So excited for today's because I get to talk to two guys who are making a whole bunch of money in LA. Austin and Jay are the managing partners at Slauson and Co., an LA-based venture capital firm based on focus on early stage technology investments. The firm is driven by its mission of economic inclusion and democratizing access to entrepreneurship for historically underrepresented founders. Jay, AJ, and Austin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I want to talk first about like you before we started recording here, AJ. You had mentioned like we were talking about the art gallery, and you furnished your office with art that was representative of the mission. Can you talk about the mission, why it was important when you started, and probably why it's even more important in the climate we're in today?
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you again for having us, man. I think you already kind of hit the nail on the head when you kind of gave the overview on who we are, what we're about. Everything that Austin and I have ever talked about in our careers, particularly as we both independently started in venture capital, independent of each other a little over a dozen years ago, as we would compare notes, we always talked about this massive opportunity to build a more inclusive ecosystem that tapped in a wider variety of perspectives. Having worked in traditional investing, myself at Queensbridge Venture Partners and Austin at 10110, focused on enterprise SaaS here at LA, there was just such a massive white space, or as Austin, so refers to it as like everybody's fishing in this lake, and then there's a massive pond of perspective that is just not represented in the products and the services that we're consuming. And then the in-passing conversations that we would have over the better part of a decade that somebody needed to build a firm that was natively built to source and support the best and brightest of those perspectives, not that come from any one, just really into this idea that there was innovation that existed outside of white men in 6 geographies, and that we wanted to build a firm that was tapped into that. So everything that we do as a firm, every piece of content, the way that we build our office, the way that we curate our team, the way that we move, the way that we support our founders, it really comes from that cloth. You alluded to the art. I think when we were able to kind of pull together our first fund and start investing from it in 2021, which was a $75 million fund, we were like, we can't be Slauson and Co. and our office is in Culver City. But there also isn't a lot of office spaces on Slauson Avenue. So there's a space that we were familiar with that kind of resembled an old school art gallery, and we were just fortunate enough to have friends that kind of put on artists the same way we hope to put on entrepreneurs. So we're blessed to be able to be in this space with a bunch of talented folks that are pushing the needle forward through art and culture, and kind of continue to find new ways to tell our story on how we kind of integrate this intentionality without compromising the quality of the outcome.
Austin, there is, I'm looking at you, both of your backgrounds, obviously smart, obviously very well trained in finance and economics and et cetera. But there was a lot of things you could have done with your brain power. There was a lot of things you could have done with your intellect. There's a lot of things you could have done with your networks. Why did you choose venture capital as the best place for you to make your dent toward the things that matter to you?
Yeah, man, I tried a lot of things too, bro. So it wasn't. I wish I could tell you the story of it being a crystal clear from day one, but AJ could tell a story. But in my case, for me, I've always been interested in technology. Built a web development shop when I was in high school. Made a little bit of pocket change from that, which sort of sparked my interest. But I think going to college, I went to Morehouse in Atlanta, and when I came back, it was to LA. It was always like trying to find, I think I'm smart, I think I'm ambitious, I think I'm driven, and trying to sort of play this balance between like what my friends are doing, who are all going to Wall Street, making a bunch of money and doing all that. But like something about me has always been wired more entrepreneurial minded and had an interest there. And so I think a lot of my early career, in my 20s in particular, was just confusion of like, do I want to follow this path where I could just get somebody to cut me a big enough check and I could live nice, or do I want to create something from scratch where I'm probably going to be broke for a very long time, and the messiness of trying to find exactly what it was. But I think I ended up working in investment management for a while. I also ended up running a dev shop post college for a while, and so I think that continued that sort of back and forth, if you will. But the thing that really clicked for me is somewhere in my 20s. I started to read more articles about like technology companies that are getting funded and really early stage technology and emerging technologies, which is what I was into. And kind of the combination of being able to work with technology, still continue to work with investing, and then also working with entrepreneurs, which I think of as the most passionate people on the planet. And I love being around that like energy, really. That made me say to myself that like, oh, there's this thing called venture capital that is the combination of all those things. And once I saw that, it was crystal clear that like I was like, oh, I've had all this confusion, but this is what I'm supposed to be doing with the rest of my life, rest of my career. And I think from the first time that I concluded that at this point, probably almost certainly a decade and a half, probably closer to 20 years ago, kind of haven't looked back since then, and this is what I'll be doing forever, as far as I could tell.
AJ, being based where you are, how does your geography influence how you approach investing and how you deploy capital?
Yeah, love that question. So, even geography is such an interesting word when you kind of think about it. So, Austin and I, we've actually been friends since high school. So, when he was kind of planting the seeds for that dev shop, I was able to tap his, being one of the few people that I knew how to was proficient in computer and design language. I used to throw parties and he used to design my flyers. And we both met right off of Slauson Avenue a little over probably 25 years ago at this point when we were in high school. And when we were kind of coming together and thinking about building this firm, we couldn't help but think about these incredible networks and these ecosystems like Silicon Valley, which has had these compounding network effects of innovation and inspiration and why it's such a special place. But then really thinking about the corridor and even like just the mainstay of areas like South LA that are extremely culturally rich. They just have, and there's so much perspective. There's so much, popular culture that is, cultivated in areas like the one that we're sitting across right now. But then they get repackaged and exported to different parts of the world without attributing the origin stories of where a lot of that, art and music and fashion kind of come from and in ideas. So when we think about even Slauson Avenue it is a 30-mile stretch. It's probably one of the more prominent thoroughfares. Everybody knows it, but they don't know it they use it to get from one end of the city to the other. But when we thought about the mission that we wanted to kind of encapsulate, when you're on the east side of the street, it is a very blue-collar, industrial, commercial area. Majority of the stretch as you're traveling west is extremely culturally rich, but also under-resourced, mostly communities of color. And it ends in kind of one of the highest concentrations of minority wealth in the country, and that's how we view the metaphor for our mission. So when we were building it, we specifically wanted to be, we can confidently say we're the only institutional grade VC firm on Slauson Avenue. TikTok actually exists at the end of it, so that's probably the biggest brand name that you'll know. But I think when we think about this geography and what inspires us the most, it really is communities like the ones that exist alongside this corridor in every major city and municipality across the U.S. And we're built to build a brand that kind of speaks to folks that have historically been excluded and again, try to find the best and brightest of those that leverage their perspective to build the next big category defining generational business.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give this to either of you guys who want to answer it. But I remember, God, it had to be almost 10 years ago now. I wrote this blog post on LinkedIn that caught fire, and it was called "Hey, Startup, You Don't Live in Silicon Valley." And the thesis of that, post was, at the time, especially, most education about how to raise money was coming from Paul Graham at Y Combinator, and people like that. And that doesn't always apply in Detroit or, pick a place outside of Silicon Valley. The language, the terms that investors want, all these things that may apply in San Francisco, different language, different conversation somewhere else. And the reason I bring up that story is I'm interested in your take on how, I don't know if forgiving is the right word, but how accepting of alternative paths to entry do you have to be if you're going to focus on this population of founders, because they weren't brought up going to UCLA or pick one of these schools, Stanford or et cetera, and they didn't grow up with the lexicon of venture capital. They may have an idea that's worthy, but may not be necessarily prepared to accept capital. And you like, you got something, let me help you get there. How do you do that?
That's a great question, and kind of, if I really had to boil it down, like that is the question that we're kind of setting out to answer, and it's the one that we wake up every morning thinking about and working toward and trying to figure out. And for that matter, if we do figure out, sort of create the playbook for others to follow our lead in doing so. But the reality is, so there are a couple of things baked into that. It's such a profound question. One is thinking about Silicon Valley as it stands and like the advice that was given, by the Paul Grahams or whatever. I have a ton of respect for Paul Graham and what has been built in Silicon Valley broadly. I think that there are a lot of people that kind of knock Silicon Valley, and in the grand scheme of things, it's actually working fairly well for what it intends to do. Who it's not working for is the people that have been, excluded. And to your point, it's most people are not part of that network. Most people aren't part of that access, and often these people are people with really great ideas and even pretty good networks and pretty good like insights and experience and all that. And so I think that when we think about how Slauson & Co. was founded, it was founded on the premise that there are those people out there and that there's a really great opportunity to back them. And so what happens when you find somebody, or somebody finds us in many cases, from who's really talented, who is exceptional. Like we're still looking for people with exceptional ideas that can scale. This is not we're taking Silicon Valley's leftovers. We're just finding opportunities that either the biases or the experience or whatever doesn't lend itself to the average VC in Silicon Valley. One example I always use is, as I mentioned, I'm with the Morehouse. Like, if I meet a founder that says they went to Morehouse or Spelman or Howard or whatever, that means something to me, that I have the proper context of understanding what that means. Would I expect somebody who went to Stanford, for business school or whatever else, and never set foot on an HBCU, to have that or understand that or have that mean anything to them, positive or negative, either way? Of course not. Like, that's not their life experience. And the fact is that it is mine. And so because it is mine, I can take my own lived experience and sort of use that as a competitive advantage, which is also, not surprisingly, in turn, what we look for of the founders that we back. I think one of the first things listed on our website is your lived experience is your competitive advantage. We think of people as what they go through and being exceptionally good and standouts in their particular category, in their particular lane, in their particular geography, as the ones that we want to collaborate with and work with to help them see their opportunity through. I guess second part of that question is like, so what happens, like, will if they don't have the lexicon, if they don't have all that, then like what happens to them after we back them, and the reality is, like, I think that we do have to, I think a lot of people would be surprised to know, and plenty of people would argue against what I'm about to say, but I fundamentally believe that a lot of people in Silicon Valley do want to find these entrepreneurs, but they have a certain way, to your point, of like, here's how I understand what an entrepreneur to look like, sound like, have experience with, and so on and so forth. And if you tell me there's exceptional entrepreneurs out there that don't look like or sound like that, I kind of need help finding them. I kind of need help understanding this and parsing this, and what am I missing, looking at identifying my own blind spots. So I do think that there is demand from Silicon Valley and people with large capital to find opportunities that may look non-traditional. I do believe that to be true. I also believe that there's demand from entrepreneurs to be backed by, very prominent, eventually by very prominent venture capital firms. And so where do I see Slauson? Somewhere is acting as a bridge or a conduit between those two worlds. we have a lot of Silicon Valley, quote unquote, royalty involved with what it is that we do and advising and picking up the phone for us and opening up doors for us. We also are tapped in to all the cities that, boots on the ground, ear to the streets of what's happening in Atlanta or in New York or wherever else. And so it's that balance in my view. And if we could kind of sit in the middle of it, I think there's lots of opportunity for us to create some awesome returns for the LPs that backed us.
AJ, I want you to come in on this. I want to specifically focus on the part their deck may not be the most incredible deck you've ever seen. Their traction may be different than other startups may be. Like, how do you see through that to say there's a great horse there I'm going to put my money on?
Yeah, I think what Austin alluded to or maybe explicitly said, I think it's just understanding the cultural context, right? And then obviously at the stage at which we invest on the pre-seed and seed stage level, even going back, I'm not going to say anything original here, is like really just understanding the grit and the determination of the founder and like really evaluating them through the lens of like, what is the problem that they're trying to solve, and are they the person that has been put on this earth to solve this problem? We very much view our role, particularly from people that don't, didn't grow up in that ecosystem or aren't natural to it, to, provide them with the scaffolding to build a strong foundation so that by the time they do go to a blue chip firm down the road, their business fundamentals and candidly, like they have to outperform because people they're being looked at through a lens that is a bit more scrutiny than your typical Silicon Valley founder or Stanford graduate. So the rough around the edges or not necessarily talking the lingo. We very much view we're evaluating them for like what is their ambition. Are they delusionally optimistic? Like, do they have the delusional vision that we want to back? Are they pragmatic? Are they coachable? How do we determine that the information and the knowledge and the networks that we provide them to help fill any gaps? What is the pace of implementing and executing against those solutions that we provide from a platform perspective to remove any bottlenecks? And God knows there are a lot of bottlenecks and roadblocks, and building a venture-backed company is the hardest shit that you could possibly do. So we very much view our role, somewhere between a coach, a cheerleader, and most importantly, an accountability buddy.
I'll start with you on this, AJ, since you got your mic open. It's like, what's something you bought recently that cost little but had a big impact on how you do business or live?
Oh man, I know that I did buy something, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I'll give you a moment.
Give me a moment.
Oh, I have a very clear
Can you ask the question? Ask the question again, and then.
All right. What's something you bought recently that didn't cost a ton of money, but it had a really big impact on either your efficiency, your business, your lifestyle? Pick a thing.
Yeah.
For me, mine would easily be paying for ChatGPT. Like just in terms of like the ROI on a product that I use, no question in terms of just being able to think through business challenges, help with research on diligence on different opportunities to like family life stuff. Recently took a trip with my family overseas, and like just to be able to walk through and talk through that, financial planning, all these things. I think being able to work with a lot of the AI models are game changer.
$20 a month, right there.
There we go. That's all it takes.
You got one, AJ?
Yeah, mine is the complete opposite. I bought an accordion trapper keeper notes organizer. I am very old school. I'm a pen and paper guy, bro. If you ever seen that old Antonio Banderas movie Desperado, I'm like Desperado, but with like notebooks. I got the mini notebook on my ankle. I got the big moleskin in the backpack, and like I am very much a pen to paper type of guy. The challenge that I just have is like, well, I'll tell you a funny story. One of our mentors and a very catalytic portion of why Slauson and Co exists is a guy named Ron Conway. Austin alluded to Silicon Valley royalty, founder of SB Angel, legendary investor. We actually met him 5 years ago, and his confidence really in us and being an early believer and opening up his network, innovating over the past 5 decades and being part of all the major movements. The funny thing about him is he prints out all his emails and he writes on and he carries the yellow notepad. And I thought I was the only person, particularly as working in this ecosystem, that does that. And it gave me so much confidence for not feeling like confidence, but it didn't feel crazy. So this $8 purchase I made on Amazon to just rip out all these papers and actually give them, people got Notion folders. I got a Trapper Keeper.
I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad at it. I have actually found that I'm better at taking notes and actually helping my brain process with an actual pen and paper. And so I feel where you're coming from on that. And you actually answered 2 questions and didn't even know it. So I'm going to start with Austin on this one. And if you have a different one, AJ, we'll come back to you. But what is in your EDC, Austin, your everyday carry? Like before you leave the house, and it can't be your phone, because obviously everybody got that. Yeah. But what is in the thing? What is in your pocket, in your backpack, in the glove box in the car? What do you have to have every day?
My BA2 plus, and and AJ's laughing because he's like, because it's funny because probably anybody that's watching this, there's a 10% of people that saw it and know what an BA2 plus is.
I just Googled it, so yeah.
It's a financial calculator. I actually literally carry it around. It's on the other side of my backpack with me everywhere. If you ever see me, I will have a BA2 plus on me.
That's probably the most unique answer I've ever gotten.
I want you to understand that it is part of my being and on my person. And in the off chance that it is not on me, I actually purchased the app. So it is on my phone. So it is on me at all times. But it's mainly because I think in terms of investing in ROI and things like that all the time, it's hard to do a lot of calculations, or nearly impossible to do some calculations in your head. And when you have a financial calculator, you can think through oh, this is how fast the payback period is on this, or this is the type of return, or this is the growth rate that'll be required in order to achieve this particular run rate. But obviously it speaks to how my brain works as well, which is just I think in terms of numbers, and that's just, and so I carry my calculator with me everywhere.
AJ, you want to add anything?
Nah, man, this my little
That's
notebook this week. Yeah, it is not a BA2 calculator. My wife makes fun of me, and any social setting, I'll be in the middle of a concert, something pops into my head, I bust this thing out, I sit down, she makes fun of me to our friends, she's like, oh, here goes a beautiful mind again. I'm like, I just need to transcribe this into my brain before my ADD kicks in and I forget my brilliant thought.
I love it. For both of you, I'll let you guys pick who goes first. But what is one thing you read or learned recently that you feel worthy of sharing? Read or learned?
I'll go first. I recently, I actually just contributed this last week. I just joined the board of a nonprofit called the Omega Institute in upstate New York, and they asked the same question. And I read this article, and I'm happy to forward it to you. It was in the New York Times, and it was really just reaffirming people's need for belonging, and how this is something, whether it's through religion or community, there's obviously a lot of things kind of going on in the world, and it's in a world of innovation and technology and ChatGPT, we're becoming increasingly efficient, and as we're both fathers, we have young children, and we're trying to raise, we live in the community that we grew up in, but it was a firm reminder that people now more than ever need to feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves. And it gives me, it's the thing that wakes me up every day, in addition to the work that we do, is how do you build a brand or a firm or businesses where people feel like they belong there. Because if and doing everything that in our power to make everybody remove all of that mental friction that might come from generations of feeling less than because of, for whatever reason, family dynamics or political dynamics or history, and kind of leave all that out the door and show up as their authentic self. And that is the thing that I think about day in and day out. I'm happy to share that article with you, but it really just reaffirmed my belief in the things that, sometimes might be a struggle to wonder if anybody cares or values.
Yeah, I think I found is people want to belong. About 2 weeks ago, July 5th. Hold on, this was 4th of July came out. Laura, maybe the same thing. New York Times. Is it the same one? People just want to belong.
It was I saw it in the morning newsletter. Yeah.
It says people want to belong. Yeah, it's morning newsletter. Yeah, Lauren Jackson. People just want to belong in New York Times. Go ahead.
Uh, I'll go with actually two quick things. One, the book that I probably recommended more over this year than probably maybe any startup book I've ever recommended is Pattern Breakers by Mike Maples. He's a VC, Silicon Valley based VC who I think it's the best articulation of understanding how essentially companies get big, or like really what's a good idea, or in the context of a venture scale business. I think it's very well written, very well articulated. The other thing that actually honestly answers your question about the thing that I learned the most or paid the most attention to most recently was, and it triggered it because you mentioned him earlier, was one of Paul Graham's essays back from 2010. He wrote an essay that I sent to some of the members on our investment team called "What We Look For in Founders," and I sent it to the team earlier this week because it was still held true today. I encourage people to check it out. He's a great writer, very thoughtful, but it's aligned with how we think about how Slauson, when we talk about founders, 15 years later, still a lot of the same qualities that we're looking for, which is a very good and solid articulation of that.
Yeah. We can't get out of here without talking about Fund 2, which you announced recently in recent months, $100 million. Congratulations.
Thank
To
you.
be able to have that kind of impact on our community is, nothing short of amazing. What did you learn from Fund 1 that, shaped your approach to Fund 2?
There are probably a few things. I mean, we're at a place, we have 160 something million dollars under management, and you know, so much of it, I think, is just about the people that we have involved. I guess if I had to talk about one thing that stands out in terms of what we learned, and what we see every day is like how many people are aligned with seeing this concept. It's not just AJ or Austin, but like seeing this concept win. Basically, it would be a win for the culture, for the community, for things like that, to basically prove the point that we're setting out to prove, that which is that there's so much talent outside of where what Silicon Valley is sort of taking advantage of right now. And I think as a result of that, we've poured more and more into getting those folks that are aligned involved into what we're actually doing. We created a thing called Slauson & Co. Operator Network, or SCON for short, which is folks that are doing really amazing things all around. But they just feel aligned with what we're doing. They're saying, hey, we used to get, or we still get people all the time, like, hey, let us know how we can help out with your portfolio companies. I'm interested, or I do this, and if you ever need help, let me know. And we got kind of tired of saying, yeah, we would love to, and then not doing anything about it. So we created this operator network to get really those types of people involved with supporting some of the companies in our portfolio. For that matter, other companies even outside of the portfolio, but are in the network that look to us to learn. So feel very proud of that. So that's
AJ, yeah, AJ, like you have fewer limited partners, fewer people who put checks in, but more institutional dollars in this one. Like, what does that mean to the fund?
I mean, a few things. I'll go back to answering your last question and throw this into that answer. I think that the big thing for us between Fund 1 and 2, like, we are extremely grateful to kind of get in the game. I think something that we were cognizant of is at the point that we came into existence was a very rare moment in time between COVID and everything that was happening in the aftermath of George Floyd, where the work that we had been talking about or doing kind of on the side in our disposable time which is now our day-to-day focus, became top of mind for everybody, including a lot of, corporate folks with programs that were designed to help firms like ours and a lot of our peers kind of get in the game. And then, the big, obviously not so elephant in the room is just the complete shift in the pendulum swinging to the completely different end. The fact that, a firm like ours is able to weather that, we're very intentional about the language that we use to describe our mission. We have no quota or anything around diversity. We're just investing through a lens that's a bit more representative of what the demographics of this country are. So I think knowing that and the really just the being in a position where vast majority, damn near all of our LPs in Fund 1 and Fund 2 are people that are very much aligned with what we care about from a value standpoint, and do not view us as a concessionary vehicle to deliver outperformance and generate alpha. I think we kind of shied away from the term, impact fund, and always thought of ourselves as being able to have a massive impact and develop a new, what we like to call internally, the Slauson standard of investing in terms of building a brand, not just for ourselves, but through the companies that we back, and being able to highlight their work in a way that is a bit more consumer facing, in a way that teaches people how to think and talk about what it is that they do. And then as we succeed through their success, we can kind of look back and our performance and how it correlates to the intention that we put into this. So I think in having fewer LPs, more institutional partners, got our first university partner, USC, right in our backyard, to folks like Fairview who have been doing this work for decades, and through this lens of generating outsized returns. For us, it's just just reminds us that we're on our way and we're doing the right things, and that we don't have to code switch or change the language to protect the work because of what's happening in a macro political environment.
Yeah, I got to add on to that very quickly, Will. AJ talked about leaving the breadcrumbs for others to follow. Like, part of how we do that is every year we post an inclusion report on our website. It talks about the demographics of who we back, talks about the vendors we use, talks about the initiatives that we have, and we do it every year because we want to be very public about how we get here. Hopefully when we see the success over time, and folks want to ask the question about, like, how do they do it, we want to make it crystal clear how we did it and want other people to follow suit. And that's really how we move the needle in venture capital. Like, yes, it's great if we produce some great returns, but to me, it's not enough. It's when we start inspiring other firms to open their aperture, to start looking at different types of founders and different types of opportunities through a different lens, or through hiring their own team and how they think about their own team, and like, oh, we need somebody who can understand, who can speak to this community, who can find opportunities with this community, so on and so forth. The main takeaway here is, for Slauson, we're not just about producing great returns for ourselves. It's about changing the whole industry.
Finally, you guys were listed dynamic investors on our AFROTECH Future 50 list. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a celebration of trailblazers who are shaping the future of tech and culture. And so 30 seconds apiece, as you guys find success with your mission, what does the world look like when you finally, we did it? What's the world look like?
On the AfroTech acknowledgement piece, this is always a full circle moment. One of the platform that we actually announced our first fund was AfroTech 2021, and I believe that was a virtual event. We were on the digital jumbotron talking about our work, and to be able to be here 5 years later, or almost 5 years later, and talk about the work that we've done to date. I think, when it's all said and done, to what Austin was actually alluding to, that Slauson is a meaningful contributor to opening up what a good opportunity looks like outside of the traditional channels and the ecosystems and the geographies and the profiles of founders, and we do so in a way where it's not a diverse or that thing over there. It becomes core for folks with way deeper pockets than ours that have a lot more have a way more capacity to move the needle at our stage, and that we can kind of help through our efforts, through our content, through our events, through our investments, through the outcomes of those investments. When we think about this from a legacy play, and in terms of leaving it better than we found it, that's not just venture capital, that's not just Slauson Avenue, that's just the world in general. And what success looks like is, it's just consideration. It's not like, again, that thing over there.
Austin, 30 seconds for you. What does the world look like when you're successful?
I mean, AJ said it all, and again, he said it all, man. If I could take 20 of my 30 seconds just to give a huge shout out to you and the AFROTECH and what you guys are doing, man. This is what we need, where it's promoted in a way that people can understand that it's possible, understand what's possible, and align with people that could do it along with them. One of the things we always say, like whenever we have an event or we host an event, and we know that there's entrepreneurs looking for money and trying to get funded, and so folks are trying to talk to us. But one of the things we always make note of is like the people that are going to help you out the most are your peers that are in the room. So it's like, get to know the people that are around. Those are the people you come up with. You ask, founders of AFROTECH, Morgan and Aaron and them, like a lot of when they think about, yes, the VCs provide some capital or whatever, but it's the idea of being able to bounce ideas off of your peers and the other people that are at the same phase as you, and just coming up together. I guess my encouragement is like, take advantage of AFROTECH, the conference, take advantage of AFROTECH and all the other things that AFROTECH is doing, to just find your community and find your group and lean into it, pour into everybody else. Because even though it may feel like leading the blind on some level, what happens is folks start sharing resources and getting hints and getting intros and getting doors open, and then pulling the people along with them. So it's just, we've all got to come up together. It has to be an ecosystem. Honestly, I think AFROTECH sits at a lot of the center of it. So appreciate you.
Slauson and Co., Austin, Clements, AJ, Relan. Thank you so much for joining me. So much.
Awesome. Thank you.